Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Dale, and I am joined by Tatiana Espinoza and Brian Hinch. And welcome to our presentation about coral reefs, the disturbances affecting this ecosystem, and our recommendations for monitoring and management. To give you a primer on the coral reef ecosystem we've been studying, I've enlisted the help of the National Geographic Society.
Coral reefs. Their bright, vivid colors can be seen in tropical ocean waters around the globe. Beyond their brilliant appearance lies a hidden significance. Coral are animals. Though they may look like colorful plants, coral are in fact made up of tiny animals called polyps. These invertebrates can range from the size of a pinhead to a bit larger than a basketball. Each polyp consists of a soft sac-like body topped by a mouth covered in stinging tentacles. To protect their soft bodies and add support, the polyps secrete limestone skeletons or calicles. Corals are megabuilders. Polyp calicles connect to one another, creating a colony that acts as a single organism. As colonies grow over hundreds and thousands of years, they join with other colonies and become reefs that can grow to hundreds of miles long. The largest coral reef is Australia's Great Barrier Reef, which began growing about 20,000 years ago. Coral reefs are some of the most diverse ecosystems on Earth. Though they cover less than 1% of the ocean floor, coral reefs are home to 25% of all marine creatures. It's been estimated that up to 2 million species inhabit coral reefs, rivaling the biodiversity of the rainforest. The reefs provide rich habitat that helps protect young fish as they grow. Coral are translucent. Coral reefs get their rainbow of colors from algae or zooxanthellae that live in their tissue. Though corals use their tentacles to capture some food, most of their food comes from the algae they house. When coral becomes stressed by pollution or other factors, they evict their algae. Coral bleaching results, revealing corals' white skeletons. Coral provide a window to the past. As coral grow, their limestone skeletons form layers, similar to tree rings, that vary in composition and thickness based on ocean conditions at the time. With some coral reefs growing for thousands or even millions of years, scientists can study these layers to reveal what the Earth's climate may have been like in the ancient past. Unfortunately, climate change is putting corals' future in danger, along with the millions of species that inhabit the reefs and the 500 million people that rely on reef fish for food. Warming waters result in prolonged coral bleaching that kill coral reefs or leave them vulnerable to other threats. Without significant action on climate change, our oceans could lose many of their colorful reefs by the end of the century.
As we've been learning this semester, disturbance can be a natural part of any ecosystem, and coral reefs are no exception. Disturbance allows for no one species of coral to dominate. Coral reefs have been shown to be resilient for thousands of years and have recovered from several disturbances over time. But unfortunately, in the past few decades, natural disturbances have been combining with increased anthropogenic disturbances, and this has resulted in a decrease in resiliency of coral reefs and a significant reduction in coral reef population. One disturbance is pollution. As urbanization increases around coastal areas, runoff from agriculture and sewage have been making its way into coastal waters, affecting coral reefs. This pollution changes the water chemistry, which affects the growth and structure of these coral communities. Another disturbance is global warming. Increasing sea temperatures due to climate change have been shown to have a direct effect on corals, leading to worldwide instances of coral bleaching. Coral bleaching is the dissociation of the zooxanthellae symbionts from the coral host, which leads to a bleaching of the entire reef. Rising sea levels are also a product of global warming and can put the corals further away from sunlight, in effect drowning them. The combined stresses of pollution and global warming leave the corals more susceptible to diseases, like the bacterial infection white band disease. This disease causes the coral tissues to peel off, leaving behind an exposed white skeleton, another form of bleaching. So what can we possibly do to protect coral reefs from these disturbances that have been happening? One way is the use of marine protected areas, also known as MPAs. These have been used recently to protect and conserve natural or historical resources through regulations similar to those enforced in protected terrestrial parks. Ecological benefits of marine protected areas includes maintaining genetic diversity in marine ecosystems, protecting threatened and endangered species, and to prevent habitat destruction. MPAs also protect against local stressors such as overfishing and pollution by enforcing regulations on human activities in the area. Marine protected areas are found around the world. They are generally found near the coast and cover about 3% of the world's oceans. However, marine protected areas vary in the intensity of their regulations between countries. Some have complete prohibited access and are no-take areas, while other areas just have established seasonal limitations on fishing. MPAs have shown to benefit coral reefs that have high anthropogenic impacts, making them more resistant to stressors that cause bleaching. They also have a positive effect on coral fish populations and diversity, both within the MPA and the surrounding area, meaning commercial fishing outside of MPAs benefit from the establishment of these regulations and protected areas. The objectives of our final project was to establish baseline conditions of coral reef populations within two different marine protected areas, a successfully managed MPA and a poorly managed MPA. We then wanted to compare and contrast these baseline conditions within these areas under different types of management. And then we would develop recommendations to improve management and maintain resiliency within these coral reef ecosystems.
Hello everyone, I am Tatiana and I will present the methods of our paper as well as the beginning of the discussion. So because monitoring plays a major role on effective management of marine protected areas, we are proposing to collect baseline data from two different MPA sites. One of the sites is an area that shows that the management strategies, because of its MPA status, have been successful at protecting the marine environments. And the second area, uh, the MPA strategies to protect marine ecosystems has not been as effective, and this is because of some lack of resources towards this area. After collecting the baseline data and comparing it to each other, we are proposing to set up permanent monitoring stations because, again, monitoring plays a very important role on effective management of ecosystems in general. So our first monitoring area is the Exuma Cays Land and Sea Park, which is one of the largest and most effective MPA areas within the Bahamas. This area was established in 1959 and is about 456 square kilometers. Results from a report card which reports coral reef status shows that this area has the highest biomass diversity, and they say that this is due to the effective MPA management strategies applied for this MPA. The second area that we chose was the Mombasa Marine National Park and Reserve, which is located off the coast of Kenya in Eastern Africa. And this one encompasses about 200 square kilometers, and it became a marine protected area in 1994. Some of the management goals for this area have included controlling activities to conform with the management regulations for ecological sustainability. However, the literature shows that the application of management strategies is very poor, and therefore the biodiversity of this area is not as high as it would be expected from a marine protected area. So for the purposes of collecting the baseline data in these two areas, we are proposing to use a broad-scale manta-tow surveys method, which is recommended by the Australian Institute of Marine Sciences. And in this method, as it is indicated in the picture, a pair of scuba divers maneuvers a towboard platform, which along with the divers is attached to a boat going at a constant speed. And the divers are at about 1 meter above the coral reef and about 60 meters behind the small boat. The divers quantify the marine environments in a survey sheet, uh, which includes data such as number, species, and size of the coral reefs. These surveys are typically 50 minutes long, and they cover about 2 kilometers of the habitat in each area. So we are proposing to divide each one of the sites into 5 monitoring areas, which will have transects, which will have about 2 kilometer transects. So we are proposing to have data for 10 total transects, 5 on the Bahamas and 5 in Kenya. So the main species that will be surveyed using this method will be the starfish and the coral reef composition, and this will help this surveying these species used by using transects will provide data to calculate a spatial index, which corresponds to the ratio of reef surface counter distance to linear distance, which gives us an idea of the abundance and the size of the coral reef. The last thing we propose to do is to take pictures along with the surveys in order to compare and contrast between the notes taken and the pictures to decrease a little of the bias. So to start off the discussion of our paper, coral reefs are very resilient ecosystems that have thrived over many centuries despite major natural disturbances. However, in the past few decades, there has been a notable increase of anthropogenic disturbances, which associated with the natural disturbances have decreased the resiliency of these very important ecosystems. So we want to start by discussing what is it that makes the Exuma Cay Land and Sea Park in the Bahamas a successful management for the marine protected area. So the first strategy that we see as very important in this area is the fish population surveys, which are conducted periodically, and they show improvements in favor of coral reefs in this area. The second one and most important one is the stakeholders' involvement and agreement. This area contains several private islands, and public islands. And a study conducted by Duarte et al. Found that the management strategies have been brought up among the stakeholders. And one of the most important conclusions of this paper was that the structure of the governance of this MPA makes all of the stakeholders aware of the natural and social complexities of managing a marine protected area, and this improves the stewardship of the area as well as enhances the protection of the biodiversity for this MPA. And finally, a very important part of the successful management of this MPA is the effective monitoring. This is a very important piece of conservation in any ecosystem, but mostly in the marine protected areas and for coral reefs protection, because this will allow managers to catch on time diseases of coral reefs and hopefully mitigate to protect these areas and improve the ecosystem. So this specific area has effective monitoring of reefs conditions, again by periodic surveys. They have set up fishing restrictions which are enforced in the area, and they have also runoff control. So some of the islands within the area are inhabited, so therefore there is not really much human disturbances.
The second part of our discussion, we'll be talking about the Mombasa Marine National Park and Reserve. And this is an MPA that, under its current management by the country of Kenya, faces a lot of anthropogenic pressures. Some of those pressures come in the form of increasing tourism and population growth. The estimated population of Kenya in the year 2010 was estimated around 40 million people. And in 2015, that number rose to around 46 million people. And then when you add in the added pressures from tourism and visitors to this area, that adds up to quite a large number. The next thing that affects this area is agricultural runoff. There's a lot of areas within the country of Kenya that rely on agricultural activities for economic and population sustainability. And these activities, unfortunately, have caused chemicals to run off into tributaries leading out to these coral reef populations along the coast of Mombasa and along other coral reef locations near the country of Kenya. The next issue that this area faces is there's many high poverty communities that are having to overexploit the natural resources from coral reefs to an unsustainable amount. And most notably, this comes in the form of commercial fishing. The next management concern is sewage and wastewater runoff. There's only one sewage treatment plant that serves the local population of 2 million people in the city of Mombasa. And unfortunately, this treatment plant only runs at around half of its operational capacity. And it only can serve around 17% of the current population. Another notable event that occurred in the Western Indian Ocean in 1998 was there was a significant warming of the Indian Ocean, and this was caused by El Nino-induced southern oscillations that coincided with the Indian Ocean dipole. And this unfortunately caused significant mortality to the coral reef populations found along the coast of Kenya. Of the 93 miles of reefs that are along the coast, around 74% of those coral reefs experience mortality. Monitoring was conducted in Kenya at 4 different locations from the years 2004 to 2010. And unfortunately, Mombasa is a representative of deteriorated reef structure. As you can see from the figure to the right, Mombasa has a higher algal turf cover, represented by the blue bar, than it does coral cover, and a area that has a better representation of what an ideal coral reef cover would be the city of Kitsitsi. So that's a little bit concerning as well, given the coral event that occurred in 1998. You can see that Mombasa, Malindi, and Watamu were areas that were affected significantly by that. The coral reefs extend around half a kilometer to 2 kilometers from the shoreline, and can be found at areas that are 45 meters deep. And currently, the country of Kenya has 9 MPAs that were established between the years of 1968 to 1994. And these have been successful in current locations, but not in the Mombasa Marine National Park, as we can see from figures like figure 1. So some of the management guidelines for these MPAs has been trying to involve stakeholders and communities into the decision-making process. Unfortunately, MPAs that have been present for over 4 decades were initially established without having a lot of input from local communities. So there was a top-down approach by the Kenyan Wildlife Service and the Kenyan government officials in establishing these MPAs. And local communities rely on these MPAs for the natural resources that are provided by them. So something that the country has been trying out has been community conserved areas. So what this allows for is the local communities to have a voice in the implementation of monitoring programs at the local level, and also to give a voice to these local communities and how these MPAs are established. So, and this allows for community members to be trained. It also can engage stakeholders, which can help to gain community support to establish areas like MPAs and CCAs that can help protect coral reef populations, and it's a win-win scenario. So one of the suggestions that we have is to install permanent coral reef monitoring sites. These will allow for the ability to monitor hard and soft coral reef populations, be able to quantify effects of public and environmental pressures that face these coral reef populations, and increased checks and balances of the management guidelines of MPAs and CCAs, and will allow for an informed decision-making process to take place. So the suggestions that we have to the Kenyan officials is for them to engage local communities through the CCAs as building blocks for monitoring experience of these coral reef populations. So to bridge the gap between local communities and government officials to ensure that they are taking into consideration the natural resource needs that these communities have, but also managing for the protection of these coral reef areas. Also, we suggest that local citizens of Mombasa who rely on these natural resources from coral reefs to be trained by the Kenyan Wildlife Service to perform monitoring within the Mombasa National Marine Park and Reserve so that there can be a successful engagement of the local populations, and then also provide insight in how these coral reefs are being managed and having input into that process. So with these suggestions, we hope that these actions will help to manage this MPA in a more effective manner for the future. We hope that there will be information feedback into how these coral reefs are reacting to compounding effects, whether it be from tourism, sewage pollution, and increasing populations. We also would like for the Kenyan officials to have consideration of the current management practices and hope that change and investment into education and infrastructure improvements will take place to help manage this MPA and other MPAs more effectively. And we hope also that Kenyan officials can take these prescriptions that we are providing to them and help to maintain the productivity of these coral reefs into the future. With that, we conclude our presentation on the disturbances of coral reefs, and we hope that you have found this presentation beneficial, and we look forward to listening to your presentations on other disturbances found in ecosystems. Thank you very much.